In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, where the Taliban's grip tightened like a noose around coalition forces, one woman would shatter every stereotype about female soldiers. They called her Scope Princess, a mocking nickname meant to diminish her skills and question her place on the battlefield. Little did they know, this so-called princess would soon deliver the most critical shot in modern military history, saving over 100 lives with a single perfectly placed bullet. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Chen had always been different. Growing up in rural Montana, she spent her childhood hunting with her grandfather, learning to read wind patterns and calculate distances that would make seasoned marksmen envious. While other girls her age were playing with dolls, Sarah was perfecting her breathing techniques and mastering the art of the perfect shot. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, recognized something special in his granddaughter, a natural talent that couldn't be taught, only refined. When Sarah enlisted in the Army at 18, she faced immediate skepticism. The year was 2019, and while women had been integrated into combat roles, the sniper community remained largely a boys' club. Her drill instructors questioned whether she had the physical strength to carry the heavy equipment. Her fellow recruits wondered if she could handle the psychological pressure of taking a life. But Sarah had something most of them lacked, an unwavering determination forged in the Montana wilderness and tempered by years of proving herself in a world that constantly underestimated her. At sniper school, Sarah's performance was nothing short of extraordinary. She consistently outshot her male counterparts, breaking range records that had stood for decades. Her instructors were amazed by her natural ability to remain calm under pressure, her mathematical precision in calculating complex shots, and her almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions. Yet despite her superior skills, the nickname Scope Princess began to follow her. It was meant to be derogatory, a way for her male peers to minimize her achievements and remind her that she was an outsider in their world. The nickname hurt, but Sarah channeled that pain into motivation. She trained harder, shot better, and studied more than anyone else. She learned to ignore the whispers and focused on becoming the best sniper the Army had ever seen. Her commanding officers took notice, and soon she was selected for an elite unit preparing for deployment to one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan. The Kunar province was a Taliban stronghold, a mountainous region where American forces faced constant threats from highly skilled insurgent fighters who knew the terrain intimately. Sarah's unit was tasked with providing overwatch for convoys and conducting reconnaissance missions in an area where every shadow could hide an enemy fighter. The mountains were unforgiving, the weather unpredictable, and the enemy relentless. It was exactly the kind of environment where Sarah's unique skills would be put to the ultimate test. From her first mission, Sarah proved that the Scope Princess could deliver when it mattered most. She eliminated high-value targets with surgical precision, protected countless convoys from ambush, and provided critical intelligence that saved numerous lives. Her spotter, Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, initially skeptical of working with a female sniper, quickly became her biggest supporter. "I've worked with a lot of shooters," he would later say, but Sarah had something different. She didn't just shoot. She calculated, she predicted, she understood the battlefield in ways that seemed almost supernatural. But respect came slowly. Despite her proven track record, many in the unit still saw her as an anomaly, a woman trying to prove herself in a man's world. The Scope Princess nickname persisted, whispered behind her back, and sometimes said to her face. Sarah endured it all, knowing that her actions would eventually speak louder than their words. She was building toward something, a moment that would define not just her career, but her legacy. The Taliban had been increasing their attacks, using more sophisticated tactics and better weapons. Intelligence suggested they were planning something big, a coordinated assault that would target multiple American positions simultaneously. Sarah's unit was positioned at Forward Operating Base Chapman, a strategic outpost that controlled a vital supply route. The base housed over 200 soldiers, contractors, and Afghan allies. It was a prime target, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Taliban made their move. As autumn approached, the intelligence chatter increased. Intercepted communications suggested an imminent attack, but the details remained unclear. Sarah spent long hours in her hide, scanning the surrounding mountains through her scope, looking for any sign of enemy movement. The terrain was perfect for an ambush. Countless caves, ridges, and hidden positions that could conceal an entire army. She knew that when the attack came, it would be swift, coordinated, and devastating. The morning of October 15, 2021, dawned crisp and clear in the Kunar province. Sarah had been in her position since before sunrise, her rifle trained on the most likely approach routes to Forward Operating Base Chapman. The intelligence reports had been increasingly urgent over the past week, with multiple sources indicating that a major Taliban offensive was imminent. But the enemy's exact plans remained shrouded in mystery, leaving the base's defenders to prepare for an attack that could come from any direction at any time. Sarah's hide was positioned on a rocky outcrop approximately 800 meters northeast of the main base. It offered an excellent vantage point of the surrounding terrain, but it also left her exposed and isolated from the main defensive positions. Her spotter, Sergeant Rodriguez, lay beside her, using high-powered binoculars to scan sectors that were outside Sarah's scope view. They had been partners for 8 months now, and their communication had evolved to the point where they could coordinate with minimal verbal exchange, a crucial advantage in situations where silence could mean the difference between life and death. Movement, 2 o'clock, approximately 1,200 meters, Rodriguez whispered, his voice barely audible even to Sarah lying just inches away. Sarah smoothly adjusted her rifle, bringing her scope to bear on the indicated position. Through the powerful optics, she could see figures moving among the rocks, Taliban fighters positioning themselves for what appeared to be a coordinated assault. But something was different about this movement. These weren't the usual small-scale harassment attacks that had plagued the base for months. This was something bigger, more organized, more dangerous. Count at least 20 fighters in that position alone, Sarah reported through her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her system. They're setting up crew-served weapons. This isn't a probe, this is the real deal. The response from the base was immediate. Alert sirens began wailing, and Sarah could see soldiers scrambling to defensive positions throughout the compound. But she knew they were facing something unprecedented in scale and coordination. Over the next hour, Sarah and Rodriguez identified multiple Taliban positions throughout the surrounding mountains. The enemy had clearly been planning this assault for weeks, if not months. They had positioned fighters on 3 sides of the base, creating a deadly crossfire that would devastate any attempt at evacuation or reinforcement. Conservative estimates suggested over 300 Taliban fighters were involved in the assault, the largest concentration of enemy forces seen in the region in years. The attack began at 0847 hours with a coordinated barrage of rocket-propelled grenades and mortar fire. The Taliban had somehow acquired sophisticated weapons, including several heavy machine guns and what appeared to be at least one recoilless rifle. The accuracy of their fire suggested they had conducted detailed reconnaissance of the base, identifying key targets and defensive positions with military precision. Sarah watched through her scope as the base's defensive perimeter came under devastating fire from multiple directions simultaneously. "They're using military tactics," Rodriguez observed, his voice tight with concern. "This isn't random insurgent activity. Somebody trained these guys." Sarah nodded grimly as she watched the coordinated assault unfold. The Taliban fighters were advancing in disciplined formations, using covering fire and tactical movement that would have impressed professional military observers. This was a far cry from the guerrilla attacks they had grown accustomed to. From her elevated position, Sarah began engaging targets of opportunity. Her first shot dropped a Taliban fighter who was directing mortar fire, a clean kill at nearly 900 meters. Her second shot silenced a heavy machine gun that had been raking the base's eastern perimeter. Each shot was calculated, precise, and devastating. But despite her deadly accuracy, the sheer number of attackers meant that her individual efforts, while significant, were not enough to turn the tide of battle. The base's defensive positions were holding, but barely. The Taliban's superior numbers and strategic positioning were beginning to tell. Sarah could see sections of the perimeter beginning to buckle under the sustained assault. Casualties were mounting on both sides, and it was becoming clear that without significant reinforcement or a dramatic change in tactical situation, the base would eventually be overrun. It was then that Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through her scope, she could see a group of Taliban fighters moving a large device into position on a ridge, approximately 1,500 meters to the southwest. The device was unlike anything she had seen before, larger than a typical RPG, with multiple components that suggested sophisticated guidance systems. Rodriguez, following her gaze through his binoculars, came to the same terrifying conclusion. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked, his voice barely containing his alarm. Sarah adjusted her scope's magnification, studying the device more carefully. The distinctive shape and size could only mean one thing: the Taliban had somehow acquired a guided missile system, likely salvaged from abandoned Afghan military equipment or provided by foreign supporters. A weapon of this sophistication could punch through the base's defenses and cause catastrophic casualties among the defenders. "That's a guided missile launcher," Sarah confirmed, her mind already racing through the tactical implications. "If they get that thing operational, they can target the base's command center, the ammunition depot, or the medical facility. We're talking about potential casualties in the dozens, maybe hundreds." The situation had just escalated from serious to catastrophic. The Taliban wasn't just trying to overrun the base. They were preparing to destroy it completely. The guided missile launcher represented a game-changing threat that transformed the entire tactical situation. Sarah knew that conventional defensive measures would be useless against such a weapon. The base's fortifications, designed to withstand small arms fire and conventional explosives, would offer no protection against a precision-guided missile. The Taliban had clearly planned this assault as a decisive blow, intending to inflict maximum casualties and send a message that would resonate throughout the region. Through her scope, Sarah could see the Taliban fighters working feverishly to prepare their devastating weapon. The missile system appeared to be a Chinese-made HJ-8 anti-tank missile, likely acquired through the black market or provided by hostile intelligence services. Such weapons were designed to penetrate heavy armor and could easily demolish buildings, bunkers, and defensive positions. In the confined space of forward operating base Chapman, a single well-placed missile could kill dozens of soldiers and potentially trigger secondary explosions in ammunition storage areas. "We need to call in air support," Rodriguez urged, his voice tight with urgency. "Fast movers, attack helicopters, anything that can take out that launcher before they get it operational." Sarah was already on the radio, requesting immediate close air support from any available aircraft. But the response was not encouraging. The nearest attack helicopters were engaged in another operation 60 kilometers away, and fixed-wing aircraft would take at least 20 minutes to reach their position. Time they simply didn't have. "Negative on immediate air support," came the crackling response through her radio. "Earliest possible arrival time is 20 minutes. You're going to Have to hold your position and engage targets of opportunity until support arrives. Sarah exchanged a grim look with Rodriguez. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours given the current tactical situation. The Taliban would have their missile launcher operational in a fraction of that time. Sarah studied the missile position through her scope, calculating distances, wind speed, and trajectory. The range was extreme, nearly 1,500 meters, at the very limit of her rifle's effective range. The target itself was partially concealed behind rocky outcroppings, with only intermittent opportunities for a clear shot. Worse, the Taliban fighters were clearly aware of the threat posed by snipers and had positioned security elements to watch for exactly the kind of long-range engagement Sarah was contemplating. "That's a hell of a shot," Rodriguez observed, following her gaze. 1,500 meters uphill, with wind gusting to 20 knots. And you'd have to hit something specific enough to disable the launcher without just wounding the operators. Sarah nodded, her mind working through the complex calculations required for such a shot. It wasn't just about hitting the target. It was about hitting the right part of the target, with enough precision to prevent the weapon from being used. Taliban fighters were methodically setting up their missile system, following what appeared to be a detailed checklist. Sarah could see them connecting guidance systems, checking battery levels, and preparing the missile for launch. Their movements were professional and practiced, suggesting they had trained extensively with this particular weapon system. Time was running out with each passing second. "I need to take that shot," Sarah announced, her voice steady despite the enormous pressure of the moment. "If that missile launcher becomes operational, everyone in the base is dead." Rodriguez understood the magnitude of what she was proposing. A shot at 1,500 meters was challenging enough under ideal conditions. Attempting it during an active firefight, with lives hanging in the balance, elevated it to the realm of the near impossible. "What do you need from me?" Rodriguez asked, already shifting to provide better spotting support. Sarah began her pre-shot routine, the same methodical process she had practiced thousands of times on ranges from Montana to Afghanistan. She checked her rifle's zero, calculated the ballistic trajectory, and factored in environmental conditions. The wind was the biggest variable, gusting and shifting in the mountain terrain, making precise calculation nearly impossible. "I need you to call the wind," Sarah said, settling into her firing position. "And I need you to spot the impact so I can adjust if necessary." Rodriguez nodded, focusing his binoculars on the target area and beginning to read the environmental conditions. That would affect the bullet's flight path. The distance meant that the bullet would be in flight for nearly 2 seconds, an eternity in terms of changing wind conditions. Through her scope, Sarah could see the Taliban fighters making final preparations on their missile launcher. One fighter was connecting what appeared to be a targeting system, while another was preparing the missile itself for launch. She estimated they were no more than 5 minutes away from being ready to fire. The base's entire population, over 200 soldiers, contractors, and Afghan allies, depended on her ability to make an impossible shot under impossible conditions. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the zone of absolute focus that had made her legendary among her peers. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, the feeling of the rifle against her shoulder, and the target 1,500 meters away. She was no longer the scope princess facing skepticism and doubt. She was a highly trained professional sniper about to attempt the most important shot of her career. The crosshairs settled on her chosen target, a critical component of the missile guidance system that, if destroyed, would render the entire weapon useless. Sarah took a deep breath, released half of it, and began her final trigger squeeze. The fate of everyone at Forward Operating Base Chapman now rested on her ability to deliver a perfect shot when perfection had never been more important. What happened next would be talked about in military circles for decades to come. Trigger break was perfect. A clean, Straight-back squeeze that sent the 7.62 millimeters round downrange at nearly 2,800 feet per second. Sarah maintained her sight picture, watching through her scope as the bullet traced its parabolic arc through the thin mountain air. At 1,500 meters, the projectile would drop nearly 40 inches and drift several feet in the crosswind before reaching its target. Every variable had to be calculated perfectly, every environmental factor accounted for, because there would be no second chance. Time seemed suspended as the bullet flew toward its target. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, feel the rhythm of her breathing, and sense Rodriguez's tense anticipation beside her. The Taliban fighters at the missile launcher were completely unaware of the incoming threat, focused entirely on their final preparations. Through her scope, Sarah could see one fighter adjusting the targeting system while another prepared to load the missile. They were seconds away from having a fully operational weapon capable of devastating the base. The bullet struck with devastating precision, impacting the missile guidance system's control unit with enough force to shatter critical components and render the entire weapon useless. The explosion of sparks and electronic debris was visible even at 1,500 meters, and Sarah watched with satisfaction as the Taliban fighters recoiled in shock and confusion. Their game-changing weapon had been neutralized by a single, perfectly placed shot. Direct hit, Rodriguez shouted, his excitement barely contained. You destroyed the guidance system. That launcher is completely inoperative. The Taliban fighters around the weapon were scrambling, trying to understand what had happened, and whether the system could be repaired. But Sarah knew that the sophisticated electronics required to guide the missile had been irreparably damaged. The weapon that could have killed hundreds was now nothing more than expensive scrap metal. However, the destruction of the missile launcher was just the beginning. Sarah's incredible shot had been observed by Taliban commanders throughout the surrounding mountains, and they quickly realized that a highly skilled sniper was operating in the area. The psychological impact of seeing their most devastating weapon neutralized by a single shot was profound, but it also marked Sarah as a priority target. Enemy fighters began scanning the mountainside, looking for the sniper position that had delivered such a devastating blow. We've got movement in multiple sectors, Rodriguez reported, his binoculars sweeping across the Taliban positions. They're looking for us, and they're not happy about losing their missile launcher. Sarah could see the enemy fighters repositioning, some moving to flank her position, while others set up overwatch positions to try to locate her hide. The successful shot had bought time for the base's defenders, but it had also painted a target. On her back, the Taliban's search for Sarah's position became increasingly desperate as the battle continued. They had invested significant resources in acquiring the missile launcher, and its destruction represented a major tactical setback. Sarah could see enemy fighters moving through the rocks below her position, getting closer to her hide with each passing minute. It was becoming clear that she and Rodriguez would need to relocate soon or risk being overrun. Contact, 300 meters, 11 o'clock, Rodriguez whispered urgently. A squad of Taliban fighters had discovered tracks leading toward their position and were beginning a systematic search of the area. Sarah swung her rifle toward the threat, acquiring the lead fighter in her scope. The range was much shorter than her previous shot, but the tactical situation was far more immediate and dangerous. Sarah's second shot dropped the lead Taliban fighter instantly, but it also revealed her position to the remaining enemy soldiers. Automatic weapons fire began raking the area around her hide, forcing both snipers to take cover behind the rocky outcroppings. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Sarah knew they would need to move soon or risk being overwhelmed by superior numbers. We need to displace, Sarah announced, breaking down her rifle and preparing to move. They've got our position, and more are coming. Rodriguez was already packing his spotting equipment, moving with the practiced efficiency of a veteran soldier under fire. Their next position would need to provide good fields of fire while offering better concealment from the increasing number of Taliban fighters searching for them. The movement to their alternate position was harrowing. Taliban fighters were now actively hunting for the sniper team, and several times Sarah and Rodriguez had to take cover as enemy patrols passed within meters of their position. The rocky terrain provided some concealment, but it also channeled their movement along predictable routes that the enemy was beginning to cover with increasing effectiveness. From their new position, Sarah could see that the battle for forward operating base Chapman was intensifying. With their missile launcher destroyed, the Taliban had shifted to more conventional assault tactics, but their superior numbers were beginning to tell. Several sections of the base's perimeter were under severe pressure, and casualty reports were mounting on both sides, but Sarah's incredible shot had only been the beginning. The real test was yet to come. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The real test was yet to come. From her new firing position, Sarah could see the full scope of the Taliban assault on forward operating base Chapman. The enemy had committed over 300 fighters to the attack, far more than intelligence estimates had suggested. They were attacking from multiple directions simultaneously, using tactics that showed sophisticated planning and coordination. The base's defenders were holding their positions, but barely, and it was clear that without significant reinforcement or a dramatic change in the tactical situation, the outcome remained in doubt. Sarah resumed her deadly work, methodically engaging high-value targets throughout the Taliban positions. Her third shot eliminated a fighter directing mortar fire against the base's eastern perimeter. Her fourth shot silenced a heavy machine gun that had been pinning down an entire squad of American soldiers. Each shot was calculated for maximum tactical impact, designed to disrupt the enemy's coordination and reduce their combat effectiveness. The psychological impact of Sarah's precision shooting was becoming apparent throughout the Taliban ranks. Enemy fighters who had been advancing boldly just minutes earlier were now moving cautiously, constantly scanning for the sniper who seemed to appear and disappear like a ghost in the mountains. The fear of the unknown sniper was beginning to affect their tactical coordination, causing delays and hesitation that gave the base's defenders precious breathing room. "You're getting into their heads," Rodriguez observed, watching enemy movements through his binoculars. "They're starting to move like they expect to get shot at any second." Sarah nodded grimly, understanding that psychological warfare was often as important as the physical destruction caused by her bullets. Each successful shot not only eliminated a threat, but also sent a message to every other Taliban fighter in the area. However, the Taliban commanders were not giving up easily. They had invested too much in this assault to abandon it because of one sniper, no matter how skilled. Sarah could see them repositioning their forces, trying to adapt to the threat she represented while maintaining pressure on the base's defenders. It was a deadly chess match played out across the mountainous terrain, with lives hanging in the balance with each move. Sarah's fifth shot was perhaps her most important yet. She had identified a Taliban commander who was coordinating the assault. From a position approximately 1,000 meters southwest of her hide, the commander was using a radio to direct fire missions and coordinate the movements of multiple units. His elimination would significantly disrupt the enemy's command and control structure. The shot required careful timing. The commander was only briefly exposed when he raised his head to observe the battlefield or communicate with his subordinates. Sarah had to wait for the perfect moment when he would be stationary long enough for her bullet to reach him. The wind conditions were also challenging, with gusts that varied in strength and direction based on the complex mountain terrain. When the opportunity finally presented itself, Sarah was ready. The Taliban commander raised his radio to his ear, exposing himself for what would be the last time. Sarah's bullet found its mark with devastating precision, and the effect on the enemy's coordination was immediate and dramatic. Without their commander's direction, several Taliban units began to falter in their assault, creating gaps in their lines that the base's defenders quickly exploited. The elimination of the Taliban commander marked a turning point in the battle. Sarah could see confusion spreading through the enemy ranks as subordinate leaders struggled to maintain coordination without their primary commander. Some units continued their assault with undiminished intensity, while others began to waver, unsure of their objectives without clear direction from above. Sarah's sixth shot targeted another high-value individual, a Taliban fighter who had taken over command responsibilities and was attempting to reorganize the assault. The shot was successful, but it also revealed her new position to enemy observers. Within minutes, Taliban fighters were moving toward her location, forcing another displacement under increasingly dangerous conditions. The cat-and-mouse game between Sarah and the Taliban hunters continued throughout the afternoon. Each time she established a new firing position, enemy fighters would eventually locate her and force another move. The physical and mental strain was enormous, but Sarah's training and determination kept her focused on the mission. Every shot counted. Every target eliminated potentially saved lives among the base's defenders. By mid-afternoon, Sarah had fired 23 shots and scored 21 confirmed kills. Her ammunition was running low, and the physical demands of constantly moving under fire were taking their toll. But her impact on the battle was undeniable. The Taliban assault, which had begun with overwhelming numerical superiority and sophisticated coordination, was now fractured and disorganized. The base's defenders were beginning to gain the upper hand, capitalizing on the confusion Sarah had created among the enemy ranks. Several counterattacks had successfully pushed Taliban forces back from key positions, and casualty reports from the base were lower than expected given the intensity of the assault. Sarah's precision shooting had not only eliminated immediate threats but had also disrupted the enemy's ability to coordinate effective attacks. However, the enemy wasn't finished yet. What came next would test every skill Sarah had ever learned. As the sun began to set over the Kunar province, the battle for Forward Operating Base Chapman entered its final phase. The Taliban assault, which had begun with such promise and coordination, was now in complete disarray. Sarah's systematic elimination of key leaders and her destruction of the missile launcher had created a cascade of tactical failures that the enemy could not overcome. But the fight was far from over, and the most dangerous moments were yet to come. Sarah had relocated to her fourth firing position of the day, a rocky outcrop that provided excellent fields of fire but limited concealment. Her ammunition was critically low, only 7 rounds remaining for her primary weapon, and she knew that each shot would have to count more than ever. The Taliban fighters who remained in the fight were the most determined and skilled, unwilling to abandon their assault despite the mounting casualties and tactical confusion. From her new position, Sarah could see that the Taliban were preparing for one final desperate assault on the base's main gate. They had concentrated their remaining forces, perhaps 60 fighters, for a last-ditch effort to breach the perimeter and create the kind of devastating casualties that would justify their losses. It was a high-risk strategy, but one that could still succeed if executed properly. The Taliban's final assault began at 1647 hours with a coordinated barrage of rocket-propelled grenades aimed at the base's main gate. The explosions were devastating, blowing gaps in the defensive wire and creating smoke and confusion that would cover their advance. Sarah watched through her scope as dozens of Taliban fighters began sprinting toward the breach, their assault rifles firing fully automatic to suppress the defenders. Sarah's first shot of the final assault dropped the lead Taliban fighter just as he reached the defensive wire. Her second shot eliminated a fighter carrying satchel charges that could have been used to destroy the gate entirely. But the sheer number of attackers meant that some would inevitably reach the base's perimeter, where the fighting would become brutal and close quarters. "They're going to breach the perimeter," Rodriguez reported, his voice tense with the realization that the base's defenders were about to face their greatest test. Sarah could see American soldiers repositioning to meet the threat, but she also knew that once the fighting moved inside the base's perimeter, her ability to influence the battle would be severely limited. It was then that Sarah noticed something that changed everything. Among the Taliban fighters sprinting toward the base, she could see one individual who was different from the others. He was older, more composed, and carrying equipment that suggested he was far more than just another assault fighter. Through her scope, she could see that he was wearing a suicide vest packed with explosives, enough to kill dozens of soldiers if he reached the base's main defensive positions. The suicide bomber was moving with the main assault force, using the chaos and confusion to mask his true intentions. Sarah realized that even if the base's defenders repelled the conventional assault, the suicide bomber could still inflict catastrophic casualties. The thought of what would happen if he reached the crowded defensive positions made her blood run cold. Sarah had one shot, literally. Her ammunition was down to her final round, and the suicide bomber was moving rapidly through the assault formation. The range was approximately 400 meters, not particularly challenging under normal circumstances, but the target was moving erratically and surrounded by other fighters. A missed shot would mean certain death for dozens of American soldiers. The pressure was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. This wasn't just about proving herself as a female sniper in a male-dominated field, or about earning respect from her peers. This was about preventing a catastrophic loss of life with a single, perfect shot. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but Sarah's training and natural ability took over. She tracked the suicide bomber through her scope, calculating his speed and direction while factoring in the environmental conditions that would affect her bullet's flight path. The target was moving in a roughly straight line toward the base's main gate, which gave her a predictable intercept point. But the window of opportunity was shrinking rapidly as the bomber approached the defensive perimeter. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling the familiar calm that came with absolute focus. The world narrowed to the view through her scope, the feeling of the rifle against her shoulder, and the target 400 meters away. She led the target slightly, accounting for his movement and the bullet's flight time. Everything she had learned, every hour of training, every shot she had ever taken, came down to this single moment. The suicide bomber was now less than 100 meters from the base's perimeter. Sarah could see him reaching for the detonator. That would trigger his explosive vest. If she was going to take the shot, it had to be now. There would be no second chance, no opportunity to correct for a miss. The lives of everyone at Forward Operating Base Chapman depended on her ability to deliver perfect accuracy when perfection had never been more important. Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger, and time seemed to slow to a crawl. This was the shot that would define her legacy, the moment when the Scope Princess would prove that she belonged among the greatest snipers in military history. Everything came down to the next 2 seconds, and in those 2 seconds, history would be made. The trigger broke clean and true, sending Sarah's final round downrange toward the suicide bomber, who was now less than 70 meters from the base's main defensive positions. The bullet flew through the evening air with deadly precision, covering the 400 meters in just over a second. Sarah maintained her sight picture, watching through her scope as the projectile found its mark with devastating accuracy. The 7.62 millimeters round struck the suicide bomber center mass, the impact spinning him around and causing him to collapse just short of the defensive wire. But more importantly, the bullet's impact triggered the explosive vest he was wearing, creating a massive detonation that killed the bomber instantly and sent shockwaves through the remaining Taliban fighters. The explosion was so powerful that It shattered windows in the base's buildings and could be heard for miles. Across the mountainous terrain, the psychological impact of seeing their suicide bomber eliminated in such a spectacular fashion was the final blow to Taliban morale. The remaining fighters, who had been advancing with desperate determination just moments before, suddenly found themselves facing not just the base's defenders, but also the terrifying realization that their most devastating weapon had been neutralized by a single impossible shot. The sight of their comrade's explosive vest detonating prematurely sent panic through their ranks. "Holy shit," Rodriguez breathed, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "You just saved everyone in that base." That bomber was seconds away from reaching the main defensive positions. Sarah nodded grimly, understanding the magnitude of what had just occurred. If the suicide bomber had reached his intended target, the casualties would have been catastrophic. Instead, her final shot had not only eliminated the threat, but had also effectively ended the Taliban's assault on forward operating base Chapman. The remaining Taliban fighters began to retreat, their coordinated assault dissolving into a chaotic withdrawal as they realized their mission had failed. Without their commanders, their missile launcher, and their suicide bomber, they had no realistic hope of overcoming the base's defenses. Sarah watched through her scope as groups of fighters began disappearing into the mountains, abandoning their wounded and leaving behind equipment in their haste to escape. The base's defenders, sensing the shift in momentum, began to press their advantage. Counterattack forces that had been held in reserve were deployed to pursue the retreating Taliban fighters, while medical teams rushed to treat the wounded on both sides. The battle that had threatened to become a massacre had instead become a decisive victory for the coalition forces, thanks in large part to one woman's extraordinary marksmanship. Sarah's radio crackled to life, with messages of congratulations and amazement from throughout the base. Word of her incredible shot had spread quickly, and soldiers who had never met her were requesting confirmation of what they had witnessed. The Scope Princess, who had faced skepticism and mockery just hours earlier, was now being hailed as a hero by every person at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Chapman Base to Overwatch 7, came the voice of the base commander over the radio. "We need confirmation on that final shot. Did you actually eliminate the suicide bomber with a single round at 400 meters? Sarah keyed her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Affirmative, Chapman Base. Target eliminated. Threat neutralized. The base is secure." The aftermath of the battle revealed the true scope of what Sarah had accomplished. Intelligence reports later confirmed that the Taliban had committed over 300 fighters to the assault, their largest concentration of forces in the region in over 2 years. The base housed 237 coalition soldiers, contractors, and Afghan allies, all of whom owed their lives to Sarah's extraordinary marksmanship and tactical acumen. Sarah's shot statistics for the day were unprecedented in modern military history. She had fired 24 rounds and achieved 22 confirmed kills, including the destruction of a sophisticated missile launcher and the elimination of a suicide bomber who could have killed dozens of soldiers. Her longest shot was the missile launcher at 1,500 meters, while her most critical shot was the suicide bomber at 400 meters. Each shot had been calculated, precise, and devastatingly effective, the medical teams working in the base's aid station later confirmed that Sarah's actions had prevented what could have been the deadliest attack on coalition forces in Afghanistan in years. The suicide bomber's vest contained enough explosives to kill or wound dozens of soldiers, while the missile launcher could have destroyed entire buildings filled with personnel. By eliminating these threats, Sarah had quite literally saved over 100 lives with her marksmanship. As darkness fell over the Kunar province, Sarah and Rodriguez began their movement back to the base. The Taliban withdrawal had been so complete that the surrounding mountains, which had been crawling with enemy fighters just hours earlier, were now eerily quiet. The psychological impact of the failed assault would resonate throughout the Taliban's regional command structure for months to come. The return journey to forward operating base Chapman was surreal for Sarah. Just that morning, she had been the scope princess, a woman trying to prove herself in a male-dominated field. Now, she was returning as the soldier who had single-handedly turned the tide of the largest Taliban assault in the region in years. The transformation was complete, and it had been written in precision fire and tactical excellence. But the real impact of what she had accomplished was only beginning to unfold. The scene at Forward Operating Base Chapman, when Sarah and Rodriguez returned, was unlike anything either had experienced. Word of Sarah's incredible marksmanship had spread throughout the base, and soldiers who had never spoken to her before were lining up to shake her hand and express their gratitude. The Scope Princess nickname that had once been whispered with mockery was now being spoken with reverence and respect. Colonel Marcus Thompson, the base commander, met Sarah at the gate personally. A 25-year veteran of multiple combat deployments, Thompson had seen his share of heroic actions, but nothing quite like what he had witnessed that day. "Sergeant Chen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of genuine admiration. "What you accomplished today will be talked about in military academies for decades. You didn't just win a battle, you redefined what's possible for a sniper in combat." The statistics of Sarah's performance were staggering by any measure. In a single day of combat, she had eliminated 22 enemy fighters, destroyed a sophisticated missile launcher, prevented a suicide bombing, and disrupted the largest Taliban assault in the region in over 2 years. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real impact was measured in the lives saved, the families that would see their loved ones return home, and the tactical victory that would resonate throughout the theater of operations. Captain Jennifer Martinez, the base's intelligence officer, briefed Sarah on the broader implications of her actions. "The Taliban committed significant resources to this assault," Martinez explained. "They had been planning it for months, positioning fighters, acquiring weapons, and coordinating with multiple cells throughout the region. Your actions didn't just defeat this attack, they disrupted their entire operational plan for the next several months." The psychological impact of Sarah's performance extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Throughout the Taliban's regional network, word was spreading about the American sniper who had single-handedly destroyed their most ambitious operation in years. The fear and respect that her marksmanship had generated would affect enemy planning and morale for months to come. Taliban commanders would now have to account for the possibility that any operation could be disrupted by precision fire from an unseen sniper. Sarah's fellow soldiers were struggling to process what they had witnessed. Staff Sergeant Mike Johnson, who had been among those who had initially questioned whether a woman belonged in a sniper role, was now telling anyone who would listen that Sarah was the finest marksman he had ever seen. "I've served with some incredible shooters," Johnson said, "but what Sarah did today was beyond anything I thought was possible. She didn't just save lives, she saved all of us." The transformation in how Sarah was perceived by her peers was complete and irreversible. The woman who had endured months of skepticism and mockery was now being regarded as a legend. But for Sarah, the respect of her fellow soldiers was far more important than any formal recognition she might receive. She had proven that skill, dedication, and courage were not determined by gender, but by character and training. The base's medical staff provided additional perspective on the significance of Sarah's actions. Dr. Amanda Foster, the chief medical officer, had been preparing for mass casualties when the Taliban assault began. "Based on the size and coordination of the attack, we were expecting to receive dozens of wounded soldiers," Dr. Foster explained. "Instead, we treated minor injuries and combat stress. The difference between what we prepared for and what actually happened can be directly attributed to Sergeant Chen's actions." The strategic implications of the failed Taliban assault were significant. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy had committed their best fighters, their most sophisticated weapons, and their most experienced commanders to the operation. The complete failure of such a massive undertaking would force a reassessment of Taliban tactics and capabilities throughout the region. Future operations would have to account for the possibility of precision sniper fire disrupting their plans. Sarah's equipment was also examined after the battle, revealing the incredible precision required for her shots. Her rifle, a customized M24 sniper weapon system, had been perfectly maintained and zeroed, but the mechanical accuracy of the weapon could not account for the human skill required to make the shots she had delivered. The 1,500-meter shot that destroyed the missile launcher was at the very limit of the cartridge's effective range, while the final shot that eliminated the suicide bomber required split-second timing and perfect shot placement. The ammunition Sarah had used was also analyzed, confirming that she had achieved her results with standard military rounds rather than specialized match ammunition. This detail further emphasized the extraordinary nature of her marksmanship. Each shot had been delivered with equipment that was available to any qualified sniper, making her performance all the more remarkable. Rodriguez, who had served as Sarah's spotter throughout the engagement, provided crucial insights into how she had achieved such exceptional results. "Sarah has this ability to remain completely calm under pressure," he explained. "While everything was exploding around us and the base was under attack, she was calculating wind speed and trajectory like she was on a training range. I've never seen anything like it." The debriefing sessions following the battle revealed additional details about Sarah's tactical decision-making. Her choice to prioritize the missile launcher over other targets had been based on her assessment that the guided weapon represented the greatest threat to the base's defenders. The decision to relocate multiple times during the engagement had allowed her to continue engaging targets while avoiding the Taliban fighters, who were hunting for her position. What would happen next would cement her place in military history forever. The investigation into the Taliban's failed assault revealed the true scope of what Sarah had prevented. Intelligence analysts working with captured documents and interrogation reports from wounded Taliban fighters painted a picture of an operation that had been planned for over 6 months. The assault on Forward Operating Base Chapman was intended to be a decisive blow that would force coalition forces to abandon their positions throughout the Kunar province. The Taliban had invested significant resources in the operation, including the acquisition of sophisticated weapons through black market channels and the coordination of multiple cells throughout the region. The guided missile launcher that Sarah had destroyed with her incredible 1,500-meter shot had cost the Taliban organization over $100,000 and had taken months to acquire and transport to the operational area. The psychological warfare aspect of the planned assault was equally significant. The Taliban had intended to record the attack and distribute the footage throughout their propaganda network, using the images of a successful assault on a major coalition base to recruit new fighters and demonstrate their continued capability to strike at American forces. Sarah's actions had not only prevented the physical destruction they had planned, but had also denied them the propaganda victory they had sought. Colonel Thompson recommended Sarah for the Silver Star, the third highest military decoration for valor in combat. The recommendation detailed not just her exceptional marksmanship, but also her tactical decision-making and leadership under pressure. "Sergeant Chen's actions represent the finest traditions of the United States Army," Thompson wrote. "Her courage, skill, and determination under fire saved the lives of over 200 coalition personnel and dealt a devastating blow to enemy forces in the region." The broader military community began to take notice of Sarah's extraordinary performance. Reports of her actions reached the Pentagon, where senior officials were amazed by the scope of what a single sniper had accomplished. The story of the Scope Princess, who had saved over 100 lives with precision fire, began to spread throughout military circles, inspiring other female soldiers and challenging preconceptions about women in combat roles. Sarah's family in Montana learned of her actions through official channels, as her father received a phone call from Sarah's commanding officer. The conversation was brief but profound, as Colonel Thompson explained that Sarah had distinguished herself in combat and saved countless lives. For her grandfather, the Vietnam veteran who had taught her to shoot, the news was both proud and poignant. His granddaughter had become everything he had hoped she could be. The tactical lessons learned from Sarah's performance were immediately incorporated into sniper training programs throughout the military. Her ability to engage targets at extreme range while under fire, her tactical movement under pressure, and her target prioritization under chaotic conditions became case studies for aspiring snipers. The engagement at Forward Operating Base Chapman was already being discussed as one of the finest examples of sniper employment in modern military history. The impact on female soldiers throughout the military was equally significant. Sarah's actions had proven definitively that women could not only serve effectively in combat roles, but could excel at the highest levels of military performance. The Scope Princess, who had faced skepticism and mockery, had become a symbol of female capability and determination in the face of adversity. The Taliban's response to their devastating defeat was swift and telling. Intercepted communications revealed that they had placed a significant bounty on Sarah's head, recognizing her as a threat to their operations throughout the region. The fact that they were willing to devote resources to targeting a single sniper spoke to the psychological impact her actions had created within their organization. Sarah's fellow snipers throughout the military began to study her techniques and decision-making process. The combination of exceptional marksmanship, tactical awareness, and courage under fire that she had demonstrated represented the pinnacle of sniper performance. Her actions had set a new standard for what was possible in the profession. Regardless of gender, the media attention surrounding Sarah's actions was carefully managed by military public affairs officials, who recognized both the inspirational value of her story and the operational security concerns it raised. Limited details were released to the public, emphasizing her heroism while protecting information that could compromise future operations. The story of the female sniper who had saved over 100 lives captured public imagination and challenged stereotypes about women in combat. The long-term implications of Sarah's actions extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. The Taliban's failure to achieve their objectives at Forward Operating Base Chapman forced them to reassess their entire approach to operations in the region. The knowledge that coalition forces had snipers capable of disrupting their most sophisticated attacks would influence their planning for years to come. Sarah's equipment manufacturer took note of her performance as well, recognizing that their rifles and optics had been used to achieve some of the most remarkable shots in military history. The company began using her story in their marketing materials, emphasizing the precision and reliability of their products under the most demanding conditions. The psychological support Sarah received following the engagement was crucial to her continued effectiveness. Military psychologists recognized the pressure of saving so many lives, combined with the intense combat stress of the day-long battle, could have significant mental health implications. Sarah's ability to process the events and continue her military service was testament to both her mental toughness and the quality of support she received. But the ultimate recognition of her extraordinary service was still to come. Yet, even as the dust settled and the immediate aftermath was processed, Sarah's story was far from over. What would happen next would cement her place in military history forever. But the ultimate recognition of her extraordinary service was still to come. The formal award ceremony for Sarah's Silver Star took place 3 months after the battle at Forward Operating Base Chapman. The ceremony was held at Bagram Airfield, with senior military officials from throughout the theater of operations in attendance. As Sarah stood at attention while the citation was read, the magnitude of what she had accomplished was evident in the faces of everyone present. The Silver Star citation detailed Sarah's actions with military precision, for gallantry in action against an armed enemy while serving as a sniper with coalition forces in Afghanistan. Sergeant Chen's exceptional marksmanship and tactical decision-making during a coordinated Taliban assault on forward operating base Chapman resulted in the elimination of 22 enemy fighters, the destruction of a guided missile launcher, and the prevention of a suicide bombing that could have killed dozens of coalition personnel. Her actions under fire demonstrated the finest traditions of military service and saved over 100 lives. But the formal recognition was just the beginning of Sarah's legacy. Her story began to spread throughout the military community, inspiring a new generation of female soldiers to pursue roles that had traditionally been closed to them. The Scope Princess, who had once faced mockery and skepticism, had become a symbol of what was possible when skill, determination, and courage combined with opportunity. Sarah's performance at Forward Operating Base Chapman was analyzed and studied by military tacticians and historians. The engagement became a case study in precision marksmanship, tactical decision-making under pressure, and the effective employment of snipers in defensive operations. Her ability to engage targets at extreme range while under fire, her tactical movement under pressure, and her target prioritization under chaotic conditions set new standards for sniper performance. The psychological impact of Sarah's actions extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Throughout the Taliban's regional network, her name became synonymous with the deadly precision of coalition forces. Enemy commanders were forced to account for the possibility that their operations could be disrupted by a single perfectly placed shot from an unseen sniper. The fear and respect that her marksmanship had generated would affect enemy planning and morale for years to come. Sarah's fellow soldiers continued to struggle with the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Many had initially questioned whether a woman belonged in a combat role, but Sarah's actions had permanently changed their perspective. She had not only proven that women could serve effectively in combat, but had demonstrated that they could excel at the highest levels of military performance. The broader implications of Sarah's actions were felt throughout the military community. Her story challenged long-held assumptions about gender roles in combat and provided concrete evidence that military effectiveness was determined by skill, training, and character rather than gender. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable were now being questioned and reconsidered throughout the military establishment. Sarah's family in Montana watched the award ceremony via satellite link, their pride evident despite the vast distance. Her grandfather, the Vietnam veteran who had taught her to shoot, was present in spirit, if not in person. The little girl who had learned to read wind patterns and calculate distances in the Montana wilderness had become one of the finest snipers in military history. The tactical lessons learned from Sarah's performance were immediately incorporated into military training programs. Her engagement at Forward Operating Base Chapman became required study for sniper schools, with her techniques and decision-making process analyzed in detail. The combination of exceptional marksmanship, tactical awareness, and courage under fire that she had demonstrated represented the pinnacle of sniper performance. The impact on military culture was equally significant. Sarah's actions had proven that the integration of women into combat roles was not just politically correct policy, but militarily effective reality. The Scope Princess, who had faced skepticism and mockery, had become a symbol of female capability and determination in the face of adversity. Years later, Sarah would reflect on the events of that day with a mixture of pride and humility. She had saved over 100 lives with her marksmanship, but she also understood that her actions were the result of countless hours of training, the support of her fellow soldiers, and the opportunities that had been provided to her. The Scope Princess had become a legend, but she remained grounded in the reality of military service and the responsibility that came with her skills. The story of Sarah, Chen, and the battle at Forward Operating Base Chapman would be told and retold for generations. It was a story of courage under fire, of skill applied at the moment of greatest need, and of a woman who refused to accept limitations imposed by others. The Scope Princess, who had once faced mockery and skepticism, had become one of the most celebrated soldiers of her generation, proving that heroism knows no gender and that excellence is determined by character, not by stereotype. Sarah's legacy extended far beyond her individual achievements. She had opened doors for countless other women who would follow in her footsteps, proving that the highest levels of military performance were achievable regardless of gender. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable were now being questioned and reconsidered throughout the military establishment, thanks in large part to one woman's extraordinary marksmanship and unwavering determination. The Scope Princess had become a legend, but more importantly, she had become a symbol of what was possible when skill, determination, and courage combined with opportunity. Her story would inspire future generations of soldiers, both male and female, to pursue excellence and never accept limitations imposed by others. In the end, Sarah Chen had not just saved over 100 lives with a single bullet. She had changed the future of military service for women everywhere. But Sarah's story was far from over. The legend born that day at Forward Operating Base Chapman would continue to grow. 6 months after the battle, Sarah found herself back in the United States, assigned to the Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning, Georgia. The transition from the mountains of Afghanistan to the training ranges of Georgia was jarring, but Sarah embraced her new role as an instructor and mentor. Her mission now was to pass on the skills and knowledge that had saved so many lives to the next generation of American snipers. The first class of students Sarah taught included 12 soldiers, 3 of whom were women. For these female soldiers, Sarah represented something they had never seen before, proof that they could excel in roles that had traditionally been closed to them. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, one of Sarah's first female students, later recalled the impact of having Sarah as an instructor. "She didn't just teach us how to shoot," Rodriguez remembered. "She taught us that we belonged there, that our gender wasn't a limitation, but an asset that brought different perspectives too." The mission. Sarah's teaching methods were revolutionary in their attention to detail and psychological preparation. She had learned from her experiences in Afghanistan that marksmanship was only part of being an effective sniper. The mental game, the ability to remain calm under pressure, to make split-second decisions, and to live with the consequences of taking a life, was equally important. Her students learned not just how to calculate windage and elevation, but how to manage stress, how to work effectively with spotters, and how to prioritize targets in chaotic combat situations. The Army recognized Sarah's unique value as both a combat veteran and an instructor. She was promoted to staff sergeant and given increasing responsibilities within the sniper training program. Her curriculum innovations, based on real-world combat experience, were adopted throughout the military's sniper schools. The lessons learned from her engagement at Forward Operating Base Chapman became standard training scenarios, with students analyzing her decision-making process and tactical employment. But Sarah's influence extended beyond just military circles. Word of her achievements had reached civilian law enforcement agencies, who began requesting her input on sniper training programs for SWAT teams and specialized units. The precision shooting skills that had served her so well in Afghanistan were equally applicable to domestic law enforcement situations, where the ability to make one perfect shot could mean the difference between saving innocent lives and tragic failure. The media attention surrounding Sarah's story continued to grow. carefully managed by military public affairs officials who understood both the inspirational value of her story and the need to protect operational security. Limited interviews were arranged with major news outlets, and Sarah found herself becoming an unwitting spokesperson for women in combat roles. She handled the attention with the same professionalism she had brought to her military service, always emphasizing that her achievements were the result of training, teamwork, and opportunity rather than individual heroism. Sarah's family in Montana watched her growing fame with a mixture of pride and concern. Her grandfather, now in his 80s, remained her strongest supporter and advisor. During her visits home, they would spend hours on the ranch's shooting range, where it all began. "You've done something special," he told her during one visit. "But don't let it change who you are. You're still the little girl who wanted to hit every target perfectly, and that's what made you great." The psychological impact of her combat experience continued to evolve as Sarah adjusted to life after Afghanistan. She worked regularly with military psychologists, not because she was struggling, but because she understood the importance of processing her experiences in a healthy way. The weight of having taken 22 lives in a single day was something she carried with her, balanced against the knowledge that her actions had saved over 100 innocent people. Sarah's speaking engagements at military academies and training institutions became legendary. She spoke not just about marksmanship and tactics, but about leadership, decision-making under pressure, and the importance of preparation. Her message was simple but profound. Excellence was not about being perfect, but about being prepared to perform when perfection was required. Her audiences, whether they were military cadets, law enforcement officers, or civilian marksmanship enthusiasts, left her presentations with a new understanding of what was possible with dedication and proper training. The impact on female recruitment and retention in combat arms roles was significant and measurable. Sarah's story had provided a powerful counter-narrative to those who questioned women's ability to serve effectively in combat positions. Recruitment of women into sniper training programs increased by over 300% in the 2 years following her Silver Star Award, and retention rates among female soldiers in combat arms specialties reached all-time highs. The technical aspects of Sarah's shots continued to be studied and analyzed by ballisticians and shooting experts. The 1,500-meter shot that destroyed the missile launcher was now used as a case study in advanced marksmanship courses worldwide. The environmental conditions, equipment used, and mathematical calculations required for such a shot were broken down and analyzed in exhaustive detail. What emerged was a picture of shooting that was remarkable not just for its accuracy, but for the level of skill and preparation it represented. However, the most lasting impact of Sarah's actions was perhaps the change in military culture and attitudes toward women in combat. The scope princess, who had once faced skepticism and mockery, had become a symbol of capability and excellence that transcended gender. Her story was cited in congressional hearings about women in combat, referenced in military policy discussions, and used as evidence that integration of women into all combat roles was not just possible but beneficial to military effectiveness. But even as her legend grew, Sarah remained focused on the mission that had always driven her, becoming the best soldier she could be and helping others achieve their potential. The little girl from Montana who had learned to shoot in her grandfather's backyard had become one of the most influential figures in modern military history. But she had never lost sight of the values that had made her great. The ripple effects of Sarah's actions continued to spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. 3 years after the battle at Forward Operating Base Chapman, Sarah received an unexpected assignment that would take her story in a completely new direction. The State Department, in coordination with the Department of Defense, requested her participation in a diplomatic mission to NATO allies in Europe. Her role would be to serve as a subject matter expert on integrated combat operations and to help European military forces improve their own integration of women into combat roles. The irony was not lost on Sarah. The woman who had once been mocked as the Scope Princess was now being sent as an official representative of American military excellence. Her first stop was the United Kingdom, where she worked with British Special Operations Forces, who were in the process of opening all combat roles to women. The British military had followed the American experience closely, and Sarah's story had become a key case study in their planning. During her time with the British SAS, Sarah participated in joint training exercises that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible for integrated units. Her reputation had preceded her, and the elite British operators were eager to train with the legendary American sniper. What they discovered was that Sarah's skills went far beyond marksmanship. Her tactical awareness, leadership under pressure, and ability to integrate seamlessly with any team made her an invaluable training partner. The European tour took Sarah to Germany, France, Norway, and Poland, each country grappling with its own challenges in military integration. In Germany, she worked with Kommando Spezialkraft, KSK operators on urban sniper tactics. In France, she advised the 1st Marine Infantry Parachute Regiment on selection criteria for female candidates. In Norway, she participated in Arctic warfare exercises that tested equipment and tactics in extreme conditions. Each assignment added new dimensions to her experience and reputation. Perhaps the most significant moment of the European tour came during a joint exercise in Poland, where Sarah found herself working alongside special operations forces from 12 different nations. The exercise simulated a complex hostage rescue scenario, with Sarah providing overwatch from a position over 800 meters from the target building. When the exercise went live, she was called upon to take a precision shot that would disable an armed terrorist without harming nearby hostages. The shot Sarah took during that exercise, threading a bullet through a gap barely larger than the projectile itself to hit a target the size of a playing card, was witnessed by military observers from across NATO. The reaction was immediate and profound. Video of the shot spread through military networks worldwide, further cementing Sarah's reputation as perhaps the finest precision marksman of her generation. But it was during the quiet moments between exercises that Sarah's greatest impact was felt. In mess halls and training facilities across Europe, she spoke with female soldiers who were considering careers in combat arms. Many had heard her story but had never imagined they might meet her in person. Sarah's message to them was consistent. Excellence was not about gender, but about preparation, dedication, and the courage to pursue their goals despite obstacles. Diplomatic impact of Sarah's tour exceeded all expectations. European military leaders, many of whom had been skeptical about the effectiveness of integrated combat units, were forced to reconsider their positions after working with her. Her combination of technical skill, tactical knowledge, and professional demeanor provided concrete evidence that women could excel at the highest levels of military service. Upon returning to the United States, Sarah was promoted to sergeant, first class, and assigned to the Pentagon, where she worked in the office responsible for special operations policy. The transition from operational assignments to policy work was challenging, but Sarah quickly proved as effective in the bureaucratic environment as she had been on the battlefield. Her insights, grounded in real combat experience, influenced decisions about training standards, equipment procurement, and operational procedures. Sarah's work at the Pentagon brought her into contact with the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. She briefed generals, advised policymakers, and contributed to strategic planning documents that would shape military operations for years to come. Her unique perspective, combining direct combat experience with policy expertise, made her an invaluable asset to military planners. During this period, Sarah also completed her bachelor's degree through the Army's continuing education program, studying international relations and military history. Her senior thesis, analyzing the integration of women into combat roles across different military forces worldwide, was later published in professional military journals and became required reading at several military academies. The personal cost of Sarah's growing fame and responsibilities was significant. The woman who had once found peace and clarity in the solitude of a sniper hide now found herself constantly in meetings, briefings, and public appearances. She missed the simplicity of her early military service, when success was measured by accuracy and mission accomplishment rather than policy, influence, and media coverage. It was during this period that Sarah met Captain David Thompson, a fellow special operations veteran who was working on cyber warfare policy. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared understanding of the unique pressures of military service. David was one of the few people who saw Sarah not as the legendary scope princess, but as the thoughtful, dedicated soldier she had always been. Their marriage, which took place in a small ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, was attended by soldiers from around the world who had served with or been inspired by Sarah. The guest list read like a who's who of special operations forces, but the ceremony itself was simple and understated, reflecting Sarah's preference for substance over spectacle. As Sarah entered this new phase of her life, the legend of the Scope Princess continued to grow, but the woman behind the legend was evolving as well. She was no longer just a sniper or even just a soldier. She had become a symbol of what was possible when talent, determination, and opportunity converged. But perhaps the most important chapter of Sarah's story was still to come. 5 years after the battle that made her famous, Sarah faced a decision that would define the next phase of her life. She had been offered a promotion to Master Sergeant and a prestigious assignment to the Army's Special Operations Command, but she had also been accepted to graduate school at Georgetown University to pursue a master's degree in international security studies. The choice represented more than just career options. It was about how she wanted to serve her country in the years ahead. Sarah chose Georgetown, recognizing that the future battles America would face might be won as much in policy rooms and diplomatic conferences as on traditional battlefields. Her decision to pursue advanced education was seen by many as the natural evolution of a soldier who had always understood that true victory required more than just superior firepower. At Georgetown, Sarah found herself in classrooms with future diplomats, intelligence analysts, and policymakers. Her presence was initially intimidating to fellow students who knew her reputation, but she quickly became known for her thoughtful analysis and practical insights. Her professors valued her ability to ground theoretical discussions in real-world experience, often asking her to share perspectives that could only come from someone who had actually faced life-and-death decisions in combat. Sarah's master's thesis examined the role of precision capabilities in modern asymmetric warfare, drawing on her own experiences and extensive research into similar conflicts worldwide. The document became a seminal work in military academic circles, influencing doctrine development and training programs across multiple services. Her analysis of how individual actions could have strategic-level impacts was particularly groundbreaking, challenging traditional assumptions about the relationship between tactical and strategic success. During her time at Georgetown, Sarah also became involved in mentoring programs for female veterans transitioning to civilian careers. She understood the unique challenges faced by women who had served in combat roles and were now trying to find their place in civilian society. Her advice was practical and honest. She encouraged women to leverage their military experience, while also recognizing the need to adapt to different environments and expectations. The mentoring work led to Sarah's involvement with several nonprofit organizations focused on veteran affairs and women's issues. She served on boards, spoke at conferences, and contributed to policy recommendations that would improve support for female veterans. Her growing influence in these areas complemented her academic work and policy expertise, creating a unique platform for advocacy and change. Upon completing her master's degree, Sarah was faced with another choice: return to active duty or transition to civilian service. The Army offered her a direct commission as an officer and assignment to strategic planning roles, while several think tanks and government agencies extended offers for senior analyst positions. After much consideration, Sarah chose to accept a commission as a second lieutenant and assignment to the Army War College as an instructor and researcher. The transition from enlisted soldier to commissioned officer was significant, but Sarah handled it with the same professionalism that had characterized her entire career. Her students at the War College, senior officers preparing for strategic leadership roles, initially struggled with being taught by someone so much younger. But Sarah's combination of combat experience, academic credentials, and analytical ability quickly earned their respect. Sarah's courses at the War College focused on decision-making under uncertainty, the integration of precision capabilities into broader operational planning, and the strategic implications of personnel policies. Her teaching style emphasized practical application of theoretical concepts, often using case studies drawn from her own experiences and those of her students. The courses became some of the most popular and highly rated at the institution. As Sarah entered her 30s, she and David started a family. The birth of their daughter, Emily, brought new perspective to Sarah's life and work. She began to think more deeply about the world she was helping to shape for the next generation, and the legacy she wanted to leave beyond her military service. The fierce determination that had made her a legendary sniper was now channeled into ensuring that her daughter would grow up in a world where gender was never a barrier to pursuing one's dreams. The impact of Sarah's story continued to resonate worldwide. Military forces from dozens of countries had studied her tactics and incorporated lessons from her experiences into their own training programs. Books had been written about the battle at Forward Operating Base Chapman, though Sarah had declined most requests for interviews, preferring to let her continued service speak for itself. 10 years after that fateful day in Afghanistan, Sarah was promoted to captain and assigned to the Pentagon Strategic Planning Staff. Her role involved working on some of the most sensitive and important military planning documents, contributing insights that would shape American military strategy for decades to come. The Scope Princess, who had once been mocked for her gender, had become one of the most influential strategic thinkers in the American military. But perhaps Sarah's greatest achievement was not measured in promotions or awards, but in the countless women who had been inspired by her example to pursue their own dreams in military service and beyond. Recruitment and retention of women in combat arms had reached unprecedented levels, and many credited Sarah's story as a key factor in their decision to serve. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable were now being questioned and challenged. Throughout military institutions worldwide, Sarah's legacy was not just about one incredible day of marksmanship, though that would always be remembered. It was about proving that excellence knows no gender, that preparation and determination can overcome any obstacle, and that individual actions can have impacts far beyond what anyone imagines possible. The little girl from Montana who had learned to shoot in her grandfather's backyard had become a symbol of possibility for generations of women who would follow in her footsteps. The Scope Princess had become something far greater, a catalyst for change, a symbol of excellence, and a reminder that when skill, courage, and opportunity converge, the impossible becomes inevitable. Her story would continue to inspire and influence long after her military service ended, a testament to the power of individual excellence to change the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.